Today we are predominantly focusing on dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD. If successful today, and I definitely hope to be, we are going to be looking at a brief overview of neurodivergence, some definitions, some prevalence, a nice bit of impact. Then we're going to mosey on to patient care and how we can make some adaptations and communication for sensory needs. Look at some nice tangible solutions or strategies or next steps. It should also be noted that right here, right now, it is Neurodiversity Celebration Week. So what a great time to have this session. All of you might be familiar with the medical model. That is the kind of traditional way of obviously supporting someone. While this is a massive oversimplification, essentially it is when maybe the individual has some sort of problem that needs to be solved. And then obviously you've got the social model, which is there's nothing wrong with the person. It's just society has lots of barriers and those barriers are interfering with day-to-day life. We are going to be looking at both today, but with more of a focus on the social model, because that just tends to be much more inclusive and you get best approaches from our experience anyway. Let's kick it off with what is neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is a term that was coined by Judy Singer in the 90s. It's still relatively new, and to be honest, a lot of people haven't even heard of it. Or if they have heard of it, their understanding is not quite accurate. Here in the nutshell, right? Neurodiversity. Neuro as in how our brain connects the dots in our head. Diversity, everyone's different. When we say neurodiversity, we are not talking about dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD. We are talking about people who just so happen to have a brain. If you have a brain, your brain is very likely to be different to the person next to you. Neurodiversity is more than recognizing that people have individual brains and how we see the world, but about celebrating the fact of it. Neurodiversity is both a concept and an understanding. We all have brains. Some brains are a little bit different. Those brains are not better nor worse, but they are in the majority. There is a threshold within society of where people can function without challenges. If you can, for instance, do independent living, communicate with your peers, and there's no friction day to day, that would be quite typical. Depending on where you live and your individual culture, what is typical can vary. Typical in the UK could be atypical in Japan. This is a social construct. If you, for instance, have a group of individuals who think differently, that would be a neurodiverse group. Just to really confirm, am I neurodiverse? No. Are you neurodiverse? No. You cannot be neurodiverse and an individual. You say, oh, my colleague is neurodiverse. It doesn't make sense. Diverse talks about a collective. If you have a team of only neurotypicals, not diverse. If you have a team of only autistic individuals, not very diverse. You've got to have that variety. Let's say you do think significantly different from the majority, so not neurotypical, and divergent just means you diverge from the norm. Neurodivergent is not a clinical term. It's not something you get diagnosed with. It's more about something that you resonate with. Do you find that in life? Yes, there are things you do really well in, but there are things you do not so great in. And it tends to be significantly different to the people around you. You can, however, be neurodivergent and have enough barriers in life that you get diagnosed with a clinical condition such as dyslexia. You could be neurodivergent and have ADHD. You could be neurodivergent and have dyslexia. But just as important, you could be neurodivergent and not have any label. The vast majority of people who are likely neurodivergent will not have any diagnosis for a number of factors. Socioeconomical, race, gender, all these things contribute to how likely someone is to get diagnosed. Just to really hit home, neurodiversity, umbrella term, neurotypical, the average within any given society, neurodiverse, a collective of different thinkers, neurodivergent, someone who diverges from the norm, and clinical labels, which we will go on to momentarily. My first question is, do neurodivergent, ND individuals have higher rates of clinical pain conditions. Is this just something that's not actually true? Or is there actually some facts in it? We got 6 true, 1 false. If it was false, today's session would be quite short. It is actually true. There are a whole heap of potential reasons why ND individuals are more likely to have chronic conditions. The main one is comorbidity, having multiple things happening at once. For example, if you are autistic, the likelihood of having ADHD is significantly higher. If you have ADHD, having anxiety goes without question. Having OCD, there's a higher prevalence. And depression. It would be wrong to say there is no connection whatsoever because they all go in together. We're sharing a bit of my own personal story. I have autism, right? A few years ago, I had severe migraines. There was something under my skin. No one could work out what it was. I had loads of scans. Okay, there's nothing wrong with your brain. Long story short, it took 2 years, but they found out because of my autism, I had hypersensitivity, which meant the feeling of my glasses, the texture of my clothes, the lights. I was under additional stress, not a lot, but a bit of stress consistently, and eventually it built up into this kind of cluster of tension. It's something which was really difficult to identify. It's something that I think you should always think that if someone let you know that, oh yeah, just so you know, I have ADHD, that's only one piece. That yes, they may be diagnosed with ADHD, but they very well might have the characteristics of autism or anxiety or depression. These things very rarely, if ever, come in singular form. I've never met anyone who fits neatly into one of these boxes 100%. Let's have a little look at neurodivergence versus, sounds like a bit of a fight here, chronic conditions. Autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Tourette's. In terms of what is defined as neurodivergence, it's a loose term because you cannot be diagnosed as neurodivergent. My personal definition is any alternative way of thinking which isn't inherently a disadvantage can have disadvantages based on the way society has developed. Some people, for instance, may consider things like obsessive compulsive disorder as neurodivergent because yes, there are challenges, but it also gives them a unique perspective in life, where other people might say completely debilitating, there's no silver lining to this whatsoever. Always exciting because you never know, am I going to get trolled? Or is it going to be a great question? What can be done after identifying hypersensitivity as a cause of pain in someone who is neurodivergent? That is a good question. Honestly, it varies a great deal. For me, the first protocol was doing CBT. It did not work for me. I think it's because they were coming at it from a very neurotypical perspective. For instance, a lot of time it's about understanding yourself and understanding where the pain's coming from and to recognize it. Whereas for me, being hypersensitive, my brain overthinking everything. I need to step it back. If someone does have hypersensitivity, there are a few things. The one that I would recommend straight off the bat is what can you do in terms of reasonable adjustments? Dimmable lights. Could you dampen the noise or echo around you? In terms of what you can do for the person, a medical approach, there is training to desensitize, but I'm not overly a fan of that. I think it's about making the world manageable. In terms of prevalence, absolutely is higher. Fibromyalgia, CFS, and pain sensitivity absolutely come part and pass. People with autism are more likely to have irritable bowel syndrome, seizures, and strokes. Doesn't mean they are going to, but they have a higher likelihood. People with ADHD are more likely to have physical accidents because that blinking light in their head that says, no, this is not working the same way. Some of the reasons why these chronic conditions are more prevalent is because of sensory processing. If you spend your entire life swimming upstream, it is tiring and it will wear you down, and you are more likely to have dysfunctions. Controversial question. Would you say someone is only neurodivergent in the eyes of a neurotypical designed world? Interesting. Yeah, I guess so. Let's break it down. I suppose you can only diverge from the norm if you have a typical. If everyone was the same, neurodivergent wouldn't exist. The difference, though, is neurodivergent is a neutral word which doesn't have connotations. It is neither good nor bad. It has highs and lows, and it is what it is. Where a neurotypical designed clinical labels like dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD are depressing. They're all about disorders and what you can't do and your limitations. I get what you're saying. I'm curious about your own personal experience. Have you seen any trends, any patterns from patients who are identified as neurodivergent? For instance, are there things that come up time and time again? An example is with ADHD. Sometimes the biggest challenges could be sleep issues, low self-esteem, emotional regulation, sensory processing. It is the things that sit underneath. For me, very dyslexic, my biggest challenge isn't reading. My biggest challenge is memory. Not always what you might think goes hand in hand. Hypervigilant, absolutely. Highly susceptible to different stimuli. Gender has a huge influence. The diagnostic manual, either the DSM or the ICD, was created from a male perspective, and even though it's had multiple revisions, it's still very weighted towards how males demonstrate a lot of these characteristics. Emotional regulation, inability to concentrate, inability to follow through with intentions, classic with ADHD. High achiever, poor sleep, struggle to regulate emotional burnout. Yep, unfortunately that is a big one. You do find ND people can go either way. High achievers or, unfortunately, really big unachievers. I think that depends on the support you have early on. Low self-esteem. Yep, you'll find most people who are of a certain age, who are ND, have really low self-esteem because they have spent their entire life being called, you're dumb, you're stupid, why can't you do this? More anxiety and depression, difficulty concentration. Women often feel invisible who are neurodivergent because their characteristics tend to be, let's take ADHD for example, rather than hyperactive, more inattentive. And that can mean that if there isn't a visible problem, no support is needed, even if there are still challenges. Struggle to pace, see the impact in long COVID where pacing and self-management, COVID was challenging. One common misconception is those with autism struggle with social environments. I would say that's not necessarily true, but what they do struggle with is change. Going from an environment where you have people to an environment which is isolated was a challenge. But a bigger challenge was going from that home environment to out into the real world when COVID had passed. The main reason for that is at home, you've got your creature comforts around you. Your brain has processed everything. When you go into a new environment, your brain is pulling in all that information, and that can cause overwhelm, burnout, resistant to change, routines, for example. Maybe you change your prescription, maybe you have a change of doctor. Something like that can absolutely throw someone. I currently have the same I moved house a few years back and I went from South London to Hertfordshire. I am still with the same doctor because I'm so resistant to change. I travel all the way for a 10-minute doctor's appointment. It is not practical. However, I just feel very uneasy going to someone new. Let's look at what happens if you spend your entire life thinking differently. On the plus side, you're very innovative, you're very creative, you probably got some quirks, you have something which adds value to society. But on the other hand, burnout is a real thing. Let's use ADHD for a primary example, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Someone with ADHD, they're very renowned for hyperfocus. Hyperfocus is when you put all your eggs in one basket. I don't care about the rest. This is what I'm interested in. They will go all at it. They'll put 110%. 110% doesn't go up to 110. 100's the max. They're using additional energy reserves that, quite frankly, is not a sustainable way of living. Then they'll go on to depletion when they get fatigued, drained, crash, and burnout. This is normally when patients may come to you. It's very difficult when you're at burnout to see positivity or see the future. This is why, unfortunately, there is a much higher suicide rate amongst those who are neurodivergent, which is something to be very conscious and aware of. Thankfully, we do get over burnout, and then we'll start to recharge. Actually, it's okay. We'll start building it back brick by brick, and then, woohoo, we're able to refocus. Once we have refocused, this is really good, let's go further and deeper and deeper. And then the cycle continues. This is a cycle you'll see all the time. People often ask, how long is this cycle? It varies. For some people, they might go through this cycle in a day. Other people might be over a couple of months. I think it's worth noting where someone may be on this cycle and at what point you might want to intervene, but also to appreciate this is a natural part of ADHD. Rather than say necessarily medicate someone to overcome it, maybe help them understand that you will get through this and this is how your body naturally works. Some solutions that we often recommend is that if someone is able to have flexible working, maybe starting work a bit later, finishing a bit later, because they find that dopamine, which is a primary neurotransmitter in ADHD, does tend to dip in the morning and rise later, which might help with focus and concentration. Explaining a tiny bit of the science to, say, employers can really help. People do tend to be a little bit more on board. Number 3, how does neurodivergence affect patient care? So remember, neurodivergence is people who think differently. How might that change how we go about supporting people, talking with people, navigating certain situations? I could tell you, but I want you to tell me. On here, nice and simple, I want you to rank them. The biggest challenge in communicating, number 1, a challenge, but not the challenge, number 3. We have masking. Patients may agree without fully understanding. Because we do take a little bit longer to process, it often means that we have this dreading feeling that, oh God, people are getting annoyed at us. And at home, I did not understand that. Maybe processing and masking go together. Masking is when you fake it to make it. You know that if you were to show your true colours, people might have stigma or pre-held beliefs about you. They're not so bright, they're a bit slow, they're clearly not getting it. It's easier to just pretend, yep, I get this, no problem whatsoever. Number 2, we have processing. Some need more time to absorb information. With dyspraxia, for example, the motor coordination condition, sometimes it's like the brain having a traffic jam. It's when there is too much information, and because it isn't broken down in a style or format that is most suited to you, it can get clogged up. People in the medical professions, you got a lot of big words. Those big words are classic reasons why the brain can get clogged up. You might say one word, like fibromyalgia. I'm trying to pronounce it, understand it, break it apart. And by the time I've processed that one word, you've already continued talking and finishing your sentence. I've not heard any of that. Processing time, and then very vague questions. How do you feel? Can be really difficult to answer. It's like opening a can of worms. I know someone with autism who typically take things more literal may struggle with this. Someone with ADHD might go off on a complete tangent, being exact and saying what you mean. This diagram I always find quite useful. It's called the spiky profile, and it demonstrates what we mean by neurodivergence. If I say neurodivergence is thinking a bit different, not fitting in with the status quo, are you neurodivergent? Everyone's going to say yes, because we all think we're individual, but there's a fluctuation. What neurodivergence is, let's say on a scale, how easy or difficult something is, and natural skills. Natural skills are things that you just have to begin with. Of course, if you are determined, you can learn anything. People with dyspraxia can drive. People with autism can be a socialite. People with dyslexia can be an author. It doesn't stop you, but it can make the journey more challenging. You might find reading a bit more difficult than the general population. But when it comes to communication, you are one of the best. You can sell ice to the Eskimos. So what neurodivergence is, it's not about being bad at something. For instance, deficit, disorder, inability. That is part of it, but that is not all. There are strengths, great communication, innovative, problem solving. What those spikes are, change per person. But to be neurodivergent, you have to have the ups as well as the downs. That's what we call fluctuation of ability. If it is all negative, not neurodivergent. That is why talking with this language is more empowering than highlighting deficits consistently. In terms of communication, this is just one view of it, but the reason why individuals may struggle with your understanding is that just because you have said something and you know what you mean, that does not mean that the other person knows what you mean. Because we all interpret the world very differently. A great example is if I say, explain the colour red to someone who's never seen the colour red. Really difficult. How do I know that you see the same blue as I see? We don't. It's similar to communication, is that depending how your brain processes the world can influence your understanding. Autism typically has what we call bottom-up processing. It's when you see the details first. Okay, exactly, that is what I'm focusing on. And then you start to branch out to the wider overall message. Dyslexia is a big picture thinker, and that's when they see the big overall message and then they get to the details. If you had told someone with autism and dyslexia the exact same, the way they get to the ultimate understanding is going to be different ends of the spectrum, and hence room for misunderstanding can go up considerably. That is one of the reasons why we always recommend, if possible, to do things verbally and in writing. That way it's like a safety net. We all have different ways, but it's a good way to know that it's not someone misunderstanding, it's maybe the way you've worded it to them isn't most conducive to their way of learning. Everything's a 50-50 approach. It's not about shifting blame, it's about understanding that we are also as culpable to misunderstanding as anyone else. Be direct and specific. Say, are you feeling pain in your left arm? Rather than, are you feeling pain? You may assume it's pretty darn obvious that we're talking about the arm. Because the way we process this differently, someone might be thinking about their foot at that very well time. They would say no. Never take anything for granted. This is not to do with intelligence, it's just we have different hierarchies on how we put information together. Written and visual summaries really helps. Some people say, I don't have time. Trust me, you don't have time not to do it, because it can take longer in the long run. Giving people just a little bit extra time to process can help a lot. Let's say with GPs, typically you have 10 minutes and you're out. Personally, I think you should have more flexibility, because someone who takes longer to process needs longer. This nice diagram here, I think, is quite useful for when it shows different communication styles. Passive. And that isn't the best approach. Or you might be passive-aggressive, aggressive, but assertive is really what you want. Sometimes the word assertive gets a bit of a negative rep because it sounds a little bit too aggressive. Not at all. Assertive is just saying things with conviction and making sure that both people understand. Moving on to number 4, sensory and emotional considerations. How can we make our area more inclusive? Let's start by understanding sensitivity. If, again, I am preaching to the converted and you know all this stuff, maybe come at this next section with a different view, that I am just talking about explaining it in a different way, which maybe you can use for your patients, opposed to, I know this. In terms of sensitivity, it comes after a few things. Your genetics. We know that neurodevelopmental conditions such as autism, ADHD are genetic, they're hereditary, they run in the family. We also know that there is an environmental element to it. Your upbringing, your parenting, school life, socioeconomic situations. People with, let's say, autism or high sensory needs, how their brain gets to it is that they are deep thinkers. Remember, they are detailed thinkers first, and then they branch out to the bigger picture. Being a deep thinker can normally provoke stronger emotions, and stronger emotions can normally provoke deeper thinking. It's a cycle. Those different way of thinking and thinking deeply normally means that you're more likely to be detailed orientated. Because you notice lots of little things, it's much easier to be overwhelmed because the sheer amount of data your brain is processing. It's not surprising why people who are more detailed orientated, who are bottom-up processors, tend to get overwhelmed. We've got another lovely diagram. Do you have a low registration of pain and sensory processing? Are you a sensory seeker? Are you sensory sensitive, as in everything is really intense? Or are you sensory avoidance, where you're like, no, I go out of my way to not overstimulate myself. Here you can see we've got hypersensitivity, which is very sensitive, and hypo, which isn't, and hyper, which is. This is another misconception. When we talk about sensitivity, we think someone is oversensitive, when actually it can go both ways. I'll use myself as an example again, because it's the best example I have. It's that if it's cold outside, I will not wear a jumper, because I have a hypersensitivity with cold. Doesn't bother me. I don't eat very well, because some people have that little alarm bell in their head. But you're hungry, you should eat food. I don't have that. So I only eat when someone reminds me to eat. It's not because I'm being difficult, it's not because I'm trying to lose weight. I just don't have those alarm bells. Sensitivity can go both ways. Some people go out of their way to feel things. Maybe you love that sensation. Maybe you like horror movies because you love getting that kind of overwhelm. Or sensory sensitivities. Yeah, I am sensitive, but I can manage. It's not a big deal. Those who are like, nah, I don't want this. If, for instance, I hate going shopping because the shopping, like Tesco's or whatever, really overwhelming because there are so much colour, so much text, so much writing, and my brain is absorbing all that information, and I normally have a meltdown. If I'm in a room that's calm and neutral, I feel much more relaxed. Do you have loads of books around where your patients sit? And would they be distracting? Is everything intentional? Is there a reason why it exists? I'm interested in the parallels of neurodivergence and trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of people spend their life thinking they are less than, depressed, are worthless, unable to integrate with society. They have been told their entire life that you the problem, you've got to fix that. And the more they try and fix it, the more they're likely to go on that burnout cycle. It is unsurprising those who are, like, say, over 40, who are probably neurodivergent, will not want to talk about it because they have been conditioned to see it as a negative thing. There's, again, a lot of people who are dyslexic tend to go for more physical, manual roles. People say, is that a direct result of dyslexia? No, it's not. They probably tried conventional academic things in the past, and because they struggled and the teacher didn't give any alternative ways to supporting them, they probably felt very insignificant, and that kind of builds up over time. A lot of these things, it's a result of how we are treated. Another open question, sensory factors that might make a hospital setting difficult for neurodivergent patients. Are there any things that I've mentioned or things I have not mentioned which actually could be quite triggering? To get those brains thinking, I want you to think at things people can see, hear, smell, taste, different sensations, balance, body positions, anything which might make it harder for someone to be listening to you. Chemical/hospital smells. Absolutely. I have super smell. Honestly, if there's bleach around, I will know. Or if any of you smoke, you may be so desensitized to the smell, but trust me, other people who are neurodivergent know you can smell it a mile off, and it can be very distracting. Beeps can drive people up the wall. Our ears are amazing. Should I say our brain? When we hear all this noise, our brains are able to tune it out and say, okay, that's important, I'm going to hear that. That's not important, I'm not going to listen to that. Basically, selective hearing. Whereas a lot of ND people, they struggle to prioritize. Rather than, say, ignoring everything, they absorb everything. Beeping, the brain isn't able to filter that beeping out. Bright lights, things like fluorescent lighting, you know how it hurts, how they kind of like flicker. The flickering is not fast enough. The brain can process it, even if you can't. Hospital food varies. Mum's just gotten out of hospital and has been eating a baked potato every single day because she is so picky with food, which is a very autistic trait, and she does happen to be autistic. That is a thing. Complex instructions on how to get to hospitals. A lot of the time, because hospitals have grown and expanded over time, their layouts are not the most conducive. Lights at night, ADHD would struggle with that. Video consultation can be challenging. If we were face to face, I'd be looking at you, but I'm seeing a picture of me as well. So I'm like, you can't help but look at yourself, and that can add more stimulation. Masks, light, temperature, interaction with lots of different professionals. Yet very overwhelming. Itchy gowns, fabric's a big thing. For instance, I genuinely cannot sleep without bamboo socks. Sounds ridiculous, but if I've got any other type, it means I cannot sleep. You might think that these things, just get over it, but it's really not as simple as that. It can cause a great level of distress. Fluorescent lights, background noise, smell of hospitals, patients' noise, alarms, perfume, air fresheners, very overwhelming. As I said about neurotypicals, how we're all different, but they function within a spectrum of appropriateness or acceptability in what we have designed our systems processes for. The same thing is true of all these senses. Some things which are bright enough for you are too bright for someone else, or too dim. Something might smell nice to you, could smell horrible or ridiculously good to them. These senses can be overwhelmed. What can you do to change things? Can you change the heating, limit the lights, stop noise, never take anything for granted? If you tell someone you're autistic, sometimes one person says, all right, I know what I can do. They literally handed me some noise cancelling headphones. I'm like, I don't want these because we're all different. Personally, I cannot stand noise cancelling headphones. The silence is deafening and it drives me up the wall. It's great to have ideas that could help someone, but never make assumptions, because no one has autism. Hear me out. No one has solely that. They're three-dimensional. There's lots of other factors playing in here. No one's going to fit into the stereotypical, this is good for you, this is bad for you. Let's look at solutions. We don't want this to get too depressing. The things that you mentioned in terms of how can we improve accessibility, tell me, what is one or two things that could make a difference? We're not talking about big things. They could be tiny. Staff awareness of neurodivergence, hence why we're doing it today. Knowledge is power, and this area is always getting updated. 100 years ago, autism wasn't a thing. Then it was 1 in a million, then only for males, then only for children. Now it's common. To give a prevalence, autism is about 1 in 100. Some say 1 in 50. Dyslexia, 1 in 10. Dyspraxia, about 1 in 5. ADHD, about 1 in 5. The stats vary, honestly, where you get your stats from. But the key takeaway is it's prevalent. In a professional work environment, some say it's about 1 in 10 to meet someone neurodivergent. In a medical setting, the likelihood is a lot higher. Considering the likelihood of co-occurring health conditions, I think it's very high. Things we can do to help improve accessibility. Time, limited resource. Ask what we can do, keep instructions simple, environment, be nice. Preparation, staff awareness, dim the lights. Ask, would you like the lights dimmed? The less sensory information that is being fed to them, the more resources they typically have to be able to concentrate and digest the information. I've got limit noise, dimmable lights, not having scented perfumes, explaining information in multiple formats. Try to avoid multitasking. A good way to engage people by talking about their interests. Those with autism often struggle to engage with something that doesn't directly relate to them. Small talk, relevant to them, can go a long way. How can you tell what might help people with neurodivergence if it is underdiagnosed and people's needs vary? This is the beauty of neurodivergence. Because it's not a diagnosable condition, it's more like a concept or something that people resonate with. It's about treating everyone the same and appreciating preferences. You don't have to wait. Are you diagnosed? No. All right, never mind. If you are, all right, I help you now. It's helping everyone. It's rather than being so cutthroat, as in you get help, you don't get help. It's helping everyone. It's true that most people do not know what they need. However, maybe they've had things in the past that have helped. So talking about their past life. Or maybe you've had things that you have seen work in the past that you can suggest. It is about having a two-way 50-50 conversation to find the right needs. My top tips is when it comes to lighting and noise, have quiet areas. Make sure there is a quiet space, particularly if someone does get overwhelmed. It was becoming more popular to have quiet rooms, and they do help. Dimmable lights are really useful. They can allow people to find the right settings that work for them. Overstimulation, having predictable routines, If you are working with someone for a considerable time, I know it's difficult, I know you're busy, but if you can have a consistent time, that can be really helpful. Or let's say you do have to change the time, or if someone else is covering you, can you let someone know in advance so they can prepare? We don't like instant change because that takes quite a long time to get your head around it. With touch sensitivity, explain contact before treatment. I know this is quite standard practice, but some people still do not do it. It's just about making sure, hey, I'm going to touch you now. This isn't purely because of personal boundaries. It can also be that your hands are cold. Doctors will typically say, oh, I'm just going to do this, but it might be a bit cold. That's not just polite. It does help someone expect the sensory information that they are going to receive. So it's really beneficial on a number of ways. Any suggestions for remote consultations by phone or video? Thank you. A lot of neurodivergent people, or people in general, do not like going on camera. There's too much information, they're very self-conscious. However, you might benefit from seeing them. I would say you don't have to. If you can go on camera for maybe the first 5 minutes or during certain moments, that's fine. When it's not relevant, give someone the option to turn off. The other thing is, if possible, allow them, if you have a note taker, I don't know if they're even a thing with them, but making sure that there are also notes and follow-ups, because it's very easy for someone to go, yep, and not understand. With phone calls, it's noting that because you have less information, as in no visuals, there are going to be things that are lost. So always asking them about their understanding. You've told them your understanding, but just because you've told them doesn't mean they've understood it. Confirming, double backing. Can you tell me what you mean by this or what I've just said in a non-patronizing way? It's just never assume people know. After all of this, what can we actually do to make appointments better for everyone? It's not a one size fits all, but there are things that can make a difference. Question to all of you. What is the largest barrier that might prevent a neurodivergent patient from engaging in treatment? We've got sensory sensitivities, communication challenges, short appointment durations, diagnostic overshadowing, or healthcare system complexity. Is there a good way to check understanding? Does that make sense? Seems like a leading question with only a likely response. You're absolutely right. That is very leading, and people are pressured to say yes. Can you tell me your understanding of what I've just said? Something along those lines, because you're getting them to say it in their own words. And then you can say, actually, what I meant is recorrecting. You don't want just a yes-no answer. You want an answer where you can actually hear their reply. That way you'll be saying, that does align up with what I was saying, or actually, you've taken the wrong thing. But you can definitely smoothen out any potential misunderstandings. Number one for most of you is communication challenges. The largest barrier that might prevent a neurodivergent person from engaging in treatment. Sensory sensitivities. Extra sensitive to medication. Some people, injections are a no. Communication challenges. Just because you say something and they've agreed doesn't necessarily mean they understand. Short appointment durations. Easy to say bye, and they haven't fully understood. By asking those clarifying questions does take longer, but honestly is probably what someone may need. Diagnostic overshadowing is when someone might have a range of pre-existing conditions, but some are more dominant. Say someone might have autism, and that's all you focus on, but actually their dyslexia is also a barrier. And that's something that's not been taken into consideration. And they're actually struggling with the reading. Healthcare systems are complex. The NHS is doing its best, but there are definitely room and areas of improvement. Would it be helpful to ask about text colour in written communication, e.g. grey versus black or background page colour? I would be mindful that you do not overwhelm someone. When someone gets in and say, all right, what lighting do you want? What temperature do you want? What colour do you want? That could get overwhelming. But there are some basic design principles which I think universally would help everyone. For example, white and black is a very high contrast and can make it difficult to read. So I use slightly off-white colour. You might notice that some people like to bung everyone with dyslexia yellow paper. It works for some, and the reason is because it mutes the contrast and makes it more palatable. Different colours work for different people. So go with one that helps the majority, or at least doesn't disadvantage anyone else. In terms of font, using fonts which are like sans serifs, which doesn't have any kind of swirly bits. They're very clear and obvious about what each letter is, and it helps the brain get less confused. There are definitely things which can be universally helpful, which I would recommend, but maybe not ask someone, purely for the reason it could be quite overwhelming if you give them ultimate preference. When I go to a restaurant, I don't want choice. I'm a vegetarian. I love animals, by the way, but it's not because of that. It's because I get overwhelmed and I just want to have no choices. There is such a thing as too much choice. You mentioned not getting around to eating. I've seen patients with similar issues. What is helpful to make sure you do eat? Reminders, honestly, consistency, having a set time reserved for eating. Even if I'm not hungry, this is time that I have carved out. Also, understanding I need nutrients to survive. But the thing that helps me most is reminders. I have lots of alarms. I have my home assistant, friends and family. They make it more of a social occasion. Managing dysregulation and fatigue in long relies on routines and pacing. How can we support neurodivergent individuals often function in extreme release to motivate behavior? I think exactly what you said is what would benefit them, routine and pacing. Yes, the brain, particularly with ADHD, dopamine does play a large role, but you can still stimulate with routine. Those with ADHD need a little bit more stimuli. You can change your tone, your variation, be more expressive. There's things you can do which can make you more engaging while sticking to routine and pace. Some people do have ADHD and autism, which then you have to adapt yet again. What would you suggest for individuals who struggle with getting a task started at work or procrastinate because they work better under stress and pressure but burn out? Acknowledging that burnout is a natural part of a person's under themselves, rather than fight it, understand it, but do know that you don't want it to get to the point where it is a particularly bad burnout. With tasks, when it comes to procrastinating, I think having a set of priorities. No one wants to feel like they're micromanaged, and sometimes that's where people go with individuals with ADHD. They go too far. They're like, I'm going to micromanage you because you need to know what to do and when. Having a priority, hey, I don't care how you do this job, but here, this is super important and needs to be done first, can give structure while also giving flexibility. I have been told relaxation strategies are not helpful for ADHD. What do you think? CBT wasn't beneficial to me as someone with autism because I overthink. More thinking was just too much thinking. I think with ADHD, I picture it like an octopus. Hear me out. They have lots of arms, right? If you're doing an activity, like talking to you, I'm holding a cup and that's great. I'm currently focused. However, I've got lots of other arms and all these arms are not being stimulated, very distracted. I like to give someone a fidget spinner, for example, because the more things that are taking up their additional focus reserves, the more likely that they'll be able to focus to the task in hand. It's why some people have music, have to be tapping. They need more to keep them focused. Relaxation is similar to, again, when I said I hate noise-cancelling headphones, because there is such a limited amount of stimulation that I am just in a point of stress. This is absolutely a thing. I personally hate massages, and I know what you might be thinking now. What? Who hates massages? I don't like too much going on. You got cold hands, I don't know who you are, there is just too much. Something which may seem relaxing to one person could actually be quite stressful for someone else. What other things might prevent a neurodivergent patient from attending or engaging in treatment the most? Just reel them out. Anything which might be a potential barrier, not feeling understood. That can cause frustration. Fear of engagement. There's a lot of unpredictable. You can't predict what's going to happen, and that can be stressful. Stigma. You have no idea what someone's pre-held beliefs are about XYZ. Having to use public transport. It is horrible. Some people love it, some people hate it. It's unpredictable. If you know you've got a meeting coming up, to visit beforehand to get used to the route. Life admin, remembering appointments, readings, processing. fatigue inducing, fear of waiting rooms, health anxiety, loss of control, shame, not building a relationship / rapport / understanding them. Oh my God, there is a lot of things that potentially could be limiting people. This is something we have to find a way around. Often, we suspect patients are neurodivergent, but we struggle with getting a diagnosis. Also, talking therapies don't often seem to work. What's the best way to get support that will help them? Getting a diagnosis is like mission impossible. The waiting list is horrendous. If you're dyslexic and dyspraxic, really difficult. Autism and ADHD, a little bit easier on the NHS, but you could go private, but that costs a lot and it has lots of delays. My advice would be diagnosis is important and it does have lots of benefits. For example, medication for ADHD. But support can be given regardless of diagnosis. If you suspect someone may have dyspraxia, I would guarantee you that a lot of the support strategies would also help them. Even if it turns out they actually didn't have it, a lot of the strategies would be beneficial or at least not detrimental. That is probably the best thing you can do. As in terms of talking therapies, I think it's about looking at alternatives. Like I said with like CBT for myself, it wasn't the best approach, but helping me have some moments of avoidance and essentially doing the opposite was beneficial. Yes, those guidebooks are important, but there has to be flexibility with all of these. Oh, there has been reports in the media of overdiagnosis and misdiagnosis of autism. Is there any evidence of this? Yes, there is. With autism and ADHD, there is overdiagnosis. But before you start going, oh no, I'm not going to believe anyone. Yes, the amount of people being overdiagnosed is a thing, but the amount of people who are being underdiagnosed is massive. Give someone the benefit of the doubt. There's still many people who would benefit from a diagnosis are never going to get a diagnosis compared to the few that are being Autism is a broad category to capture as many people as possible for them to get the support they need. Before 2013, we had niche little categories, and while they meant less people got diagnosed and they were more exact, it did mean, let's say, you didn't quite meet Asperger's, but you didn't quite meet classic autism. You were somewhere in the middle, and that would often mean you didn't get support. By broadening it out, more people were eligible for help. So ultimately, it was beneficial. Staff education and training. Would that actually help you in better supporting neurodivergent people? Having a sensory-friendly environment, designing your hospital area with sensory needs in mind, flexible communication methods, being more adaptable. So for some people, you might only communicate via text, where other people might be video calls. Using telephones, things like Zoom, but your versions of that. One thing I will say is, I can see a lot of you are saying this is possible, but I see with the telehealth services not possible. It's okay to say something isn't possible. If you are not able to do something for whatever reason, it is then up to you to find suitable solutions. I wear casual clothes. A few years back, I got told off because it wasn't work appropriate. It just seemed like it was an unnecessary barrier that had very little impact on my ability to do the role. Some people say, take your sunglasses off. But what they don't realise is those sunglasses, yes, they make me look cool, but more than that, they're to make it less overwhelming for me. I think just being a bit more mindful and aware. Is there any reason why the incidence of neurodivergence has increased so much, or has it always been so prevalent, but it has not been recognised? Yeah, it's the latter. Like I said, it was like 1 in a million, then 1 in 100,000, and it got down and down. There's two parts. One is that we are getting better at understanding. Understanding reduces stigma, which means more people are getting diagnosed. But also, since 2013, when they broadened the definition of specific learning difficulties, more people fit the categories, different ways of diagnosing people, and less stigma. It is not an epidemic. Genetically, there is no evidence to suggest that more people are becoming it. We've always been neurodivergent. We've just broadened the categories. Let's go to terminology. What term would you use for someone with autism? Terminology is important to combat stigma. Words have power. First of all, if you say living with autism, some may say, suffer with autism. I hate when people say I suffer with autism. I don't suffer with autism. I suffer with the fact that you haven't adapted your systems and policies and processes to be more appropriate for people with additional needs. On the spectrum, yeah, it's broader. Sounds like I'm surfing, guess it works. However, people have been using the word spectrum in a little bit of a derogatory way lately, so be mindful. The two I want to focus on is person with autism and autistic person. I will say it's interesting that most of you put autistic person. I was expecting you to say person with autism. The last two, while correct, have different connotations. The person with autism is essentially putting the person first, but it's saying autism is a bit like a handbag. It's something that you can carry, but then you can put down. Where a lot of people would say, I am autistic, it's part of my DNA, I can't stop being autistic. That's why an autistic person is saying it is part of me. It's not a disease, it's not a disorder, despite the name. It is inherently who I am. I would say, while not one nor the other is a yes or no answer, it does tell you a lot about how the person understands, sees autism. A similar thing can be used for all the others as well. If you want to position it as something external to the person you are treating, person with autism, which personally I would say maybe not. But if you're someone who wants to see it as inherent to the person, autistic, there honestly is no consensus. It still is very individual. What could we say instead of are you neurodivergent? Is there anything I can do to make you more comfortable? Very inclusive to anyone. Also remember, not a lot of people know they are. How can I help? Do you find day-to-day life more challenging? Do you feel misunderstood often? Do you have problems processing information? I love all of these. Do you have any thoughts about how I can best work with you today? I think a lot of people might struggle with that one. Is there anything that you have found helpful when communicating with healthcare professionals in the past? Yep, really exact, because it's talking in particular about healthcare professionals. You're literally spelling it out, which is good. Are you comfortable? Need more help? This is all perfect. One I would recommend, as you said, is do you experience challenges with focus, organization, or sensory processing? You are saying exactly what you mean. This isn't limited to someone with or without a diagnosis. Some considerations I would like to leave you all with is that for ADHD, distractibility, use checklists, use reminders, they can be very beneficial. Hyperfocus, teach strategies for management rather than avoidance. Mindfulness adaptations, different techniques for different neurotypes. Autism, limited choices. Choice is great, but if you give someone too much choice, equally overwhelming. Acknowledging that burnout is real, so some days might be easier than others. Thinking what you can do to adapt environments if you want to make changes. Little things honestly make the biggest difference. None of this stuff is massive, it's just really small things that have a huge impact. Communication, flexibility and care, handy surface and design doesn't just benefit a few individuals. If done right, it benefits everyone. Look at neurodiversity as an umbrella that everyone does think differently, and different approaches benefit everyone in different ways. And to use what I would call a strength-based approach. So look at not just the deficits, the disorders, but also the variations. We do have a lovely YouTube channel should you want additional information.